Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. This is Professor Amina Al-Din on Critical Talk, which is a production of Muslim Network TV. There are many questions roaming around, and I can't count the days except they seem to be passing quickly for leading up to the election. And I think that there are several questions many of us still have. We have questions about the movement for Black Lives. We have questions about Black Lives Matter. We have questions about defund the police. We have questions about chaplaincy. We have questions about just about everything one can think of. We still have questions. We have an interesting period of time in that COVID-19 is around, and it has really restricted our abilities to get together and have the discussions we need to have, besides zooming in and out every day, all day long, and trying to keep up with new initiatives, old initiatives, and the people who really know. Well, I happen to have with me this afternoon two people who really know. One is Dr. Charlene Sinclair. She's a senior advisor to the Black Progressive Action Coalition, and the woman does too much for me. But she's the principal of NSYNC Consulting, which consults on strategic and organizational development. But she's also a founding director of the Center for Race, Religion, and Economic Democracy. She holds her PhD from Union Theological Seminary, which has a great reputation for interfaith dialogue and really progressive work in the Christian community. Second, I have Imam Dr. Talib Sharif, who was the former Interfaith Conference president and chairman. He is currently the vice commander and national chaplain of the Muslim American Military Association. He is the dean and professor of interfaith and Islamic chaplaincy at the Global Ovid Day Seminary University. And he's director of American Muslims Against Terrorism and Extremism. And he's on the Mayor's Interfaith Council. Tell me I didn't pick some people who know stuff. Thank you both for being with me this afternoon. And let me start out with just asking a simple question. Probably not simple. What do you think is the most important thing for our community to know at this moment in time? How many days are we out before the election?
About 50-something days now.
Oh my God, where is the time going?
Less than 2 months.
Okay. In Dr. Sharif, what do you think is the most important thing?
Well, the most important thing to know is, first of all, that you have a voice. And don't get it away. Don't give it to anybody. If you keep it quiet, you actually giving it to somebody. One of the candidates is going to get your voice if you say nothing. So be deliberate. And if you're eligible to vote, if you can vote, then vote. And what you should know is that don't let the noise traffic about what's happening in terms of the disenfranchisement with the post office and other things, don't let that discourage you, affect you, deter you from voting. Vote early. Actually, what everybody's saying, you should plan your vote. Plan your vote. Plan if you're going to do absentee ballot, plan it and do it early. We know we are having some problems with the post office being slowed down, but it will eventually get there. So don't let that deter you. But again, plan early. Use your voice. I like what the President Obama said, is that the most important position in this society is citizen.
Yeah.
Use your vote.
Yeah, I would like to add as well that one of the important things for us to realize is the level of power that we have when we vote collectively. You know, I think that many of us really think that voting is just one piece of the exercise. But in this current time, not only do we need to vote up and down the ballot, but by virtue of all of us voting, we actually can sway the direction of this country. And we need to understand that. We literally are standing on this precipice that will determine where this country will go. Will it continue to be one where all of the systems and infrastructures that support our collective life together is dismantled? Will it continue to be one that promotes violence against people because they may have a different ethnicity, a different religious orientation, etc.? Or will we be a humane country that continues to fight for an inclusive democracy and have the means and the infrastructure to support all of our people? We literally are at these crossroads. So voting in this election is really a vote to make a determination around the country we want to live in and the country we want to move forward.
Okay, Imam Talib, let me go back to, you have a lot to do with chaplains. And chaplains are mediators in our horrible justice system. Tell me how chaplains are dealing with, first they had to, I mean, they deal on a daily basis with all the trauma and the strife that goes on in the prison. And then they had COVID. And you had people who were, I don't even know the correct way to say it, but they were in a holding pattern. They hadn't been convicted of anything. They were sitting in jails and other places around this country and being very vulnerable to COVID. Some states let some of them out. Mm-hmm. How are chaplains themselves strategizing?
Well, chaplains are strategizing because, first of all, they're concerned about the lives of these human beings.
Right.
And so they're trying to see what they can do to position their voice and the authority that's been given to them by their endorsers, those who have endorsing agencies, to get their backing, to help maximize their voice, to create the best possible circumstances for those who get into that system, partially or fully into that system. And of course, the circumstances that we have right now make it difficult because they always throw that in your face now about COVID. Things have to change. We have to do it. Some of that we understand is legitimate and relevant, but some of that, they're just excuses. I'm saying this publicly, but that's what's happening. Sometimes they use it as an excuse to deny access to those individuals.
I don't think we've heard that before, because here in Chicago, they let some out, some people out, and oh my God, you would have thought they had created a war by letting people who hadn't been convicted of anything, or people whose incarceration was due to a misdemeanor. But I guess what I don't think the public really understands the level of chaplaincy. You know, I know that there are jails. I'm not too sure. To me, all of it is prison, but I know that's not true because my husband was a chaplain. But there are jails, there are prisons. The federal system works a little bit differently than the local systems. Could you say just a little bit about that?
Well, I mainly deal, we actually do endorsing for the federal system right now. And we have some individuals going into some of the local ones as well. And of course, when you look at the federal side, if you think about the federal versus local, think about the state versus federal government. And you can kind of look at how the guidance would be broader for the federal side because they're covering the whole spectrum of the nation, so to speak, versus the local. You may have some authority coming from governors and other things, and you can look at how governors play games. We're seeing some are adhering to health standards, some are not. They're playing politics with people's lives. So the same thing is happening when you talk about federal versus also state. You're going to see differences in approaches because of the way they're handled within that state. If the state is obeying the health experts and you have a governor that's in line with that, then you're going to see different things and different approaches and different access given to those inmates, if we will. Versus
so the federal system has more rules that every federal place has to follow across the country, and then the states and the cities can just do as they will?
Yes, the states have some autonomy from the federal.
Oh, well, that makes life wonderful.
Mm-hmm. That's why we see some of the differences across the state when you're dealing with the state and local institutions.
Yeah, Dr. Charlene, you have worked on incarceration. What is your angle on this?
That I work on a couple of angles. One is that from a societal perspective, the level to which this country utilizes punishment and surveillance as a mechanism to keep people contained and in control, rather than thinking about how do we actually support our poorer brothers and sisters. When we look at the data on incarceration, it shows that the increase in incarceration rates actually mirrored the decrease in available jobs for unskilled workers. So
Say
if you
that one more time.
the increase in incarceration, we see an increase in incarceration
Mm-hmm.
mirroring the decrease of actual work available for unskilled workers. So there's a statistic that shows, and I don't want to get it completely wrong, but they can look at someone born in 1964, and if they have a high school diploma, a Black person, if they have a high school diploma or not, can track the level to which they will end up being incarcerated. And so the work that I do look at the ways in which, as a country, we have turned to control, surveillance, and punishment as the mechanism for dealing with poverty in this country. For men, it is incarceration. For women, a lot of the surveillance has been around the social safety net. And increasingly now for women, it is also incarceration. The rates of women that are being incarcerated are increasing dramatically. Most of the women that are incarcerated are mothers, or of childbearing years. So we really have to pay attention to the way in which we use prisons and the buildup of prisons as an economic vehicle, both to contain people as well as to provide jobs. And from a democracy perspective as well, we need to look at the fact, I always tell people, for Black people, there is the count and there is the count. And we are currently in the time of being counted for the census. If you are in prison, not in jail, but in prison, you will be counted in many states, not all states, but you will be counted in the area in which the prison is located, which means that their population will increase, which means their federal dollars will increase, which also means that when they map out the districts based on population, then those counties that actually are counting our people will get districts in them. So, depending on where these prisons are located, there was a lot of work that people are doing. They call it prison gerrymandering, because we're not counting people from the communities that they come from and resided. So not only are you putting money into these other communities, we're taking money out of our communities because our people aren't being counted. And so I always say there's a count and there's a count. So while we have a president that is trying to refuse to have every single person counted and is relying on an undercount of Black people and people that are not white people, relying on that, they still are counting every single head in those prisons as a part of increasing population, increasing resources in communities that are predominantly white.
Isn't that something? I would have never thought of that. Well, Imam Talib, since the number of women are increasing, I know they used to, in the federal system, call them medical centers. I don't know if they're still calling them medical centers for women. What are the number of female chaplains, female Muslim chaplains increasing?
We haven't seen an increase in the female chaplains from the ones that we endorse, but there is a great need for more female chaplains. Some of them have been deterred from the chaplaincy program because some of the I would say some of the cultural minds from other countries they have organizations have said that women can't be chaplains, and they are thinking chaplain versus imam. And then, of course, those who don't know have been in church. And that's what, but there's a great need for it. And we're trying to provide more education on the difference between an imam and a chaplain, so we could get those numbers up.
So, two things. One, can you say what that difference is? And then two, could you give us the requirements? Because the requirements for the federal chaplains are a little different than pulling a minister or an imam out of a church or a masjid to serve at a local jail.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, an imam, of course, that's the official title of the religious leader that leads the prayers, and there are other things. And of course, a woman can't have the position to be in front for the official prayers. So that's just the fundamental meaning. But women can be leaders; they can teach. So in the institution, chaplains really serve everybody. They can give talks. They can do counseling. The women chaplains are not required, because they really can't get in front and lead the prayers in front of the men. They can do women, but they can't do men, and they can't do the Jummah prayer service if there are men there as well. But imam, that's his job. But again, a chaplain, she can facilitate, meaning that she could coordinate getting an imam in to lead the prayers for the inmates. But she herself can't do that. That's the main difference. Now, federal versus, again, the local, in terms of allowing them to come into the institutions. Federal requires an endorsement from an agency. And as I mentioned, that we're one of those endorsing agencies. I'm out of the Nation's Mosque. I'm also the president of the Nation's Mosque, Mr. Muhammad in DC. And we endorse, we train chaplains as part of my role with also the university, the seminary university, to train them. But also that's part of our role also at the Nation's Mosque. We endorse them and make sure that they are qualified to do the things that chaplains need to do.
So don't they also have to have a master's degree for the federal system, or is that gone away?
Well, on the federal side, that is a requirement. Some of them, depending on where they go, that's a strict requirement. But the main thing is, because Islam does not have clergy, we don't have that. An endorsing agent, they can endorse them to be qualified, and they actually don't have to have that. However, we try to make sure that they at least have that, because they're also being competitive with other positions that do require it, and we don't want them to be at a disadvantage. And that's especially important when you're talking about the military, because they'll never be able to get promoted if they didn't have the masters.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to take a break now, and I want to come back and talk about some confusion over defund the police, Black Lives Matter, and the movement for Black Lives. I'm going to take a break right now. Thank you. We are back, my slums. Wake up, Charlene.
I'm right here.
I know you just typing away, giving me all of that good stuff. Okay, I need to clarify, because there's a lot of confusion about alliances, coalitions, and partnerships. For the Muslim community, there's some things clearly we have to draw a line about. But other imams have talked about looking at what the end goal is. I don't know if looking at the end goal gets over drawing that line, but other groups in the African American community have been totally confused about Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black lives. They've seen various ethnicities out in the street putting their lives on the line amongst our already formed but newly activated militia and the rise in vigilantism. So just let's have a discussion about that. Where do I go?
So just I can give a little history on the development of the Black Lives Matter movement, if you will. Many people don't realize that Black Lives Matter actually began with the murder of Trayvon Martin. When Trayvon Martin was murdered, there were a group of organizers, Black organizers, that were part of Black Organizers for Liberation and Dignity, Leadership and Dignity. And we were pulled together on a conference call to really have a place where we could speak our pain. And it was in the course of that engagement that Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi began to talk about the frame Black Lives Matter. And we made a commitment to lift up that frame. And they then began to move the frame of Black Lives Matter through social media. And many organizers, many Black organizers at that time began to talk about and center their work on this call for Black lives to matter. And then we have the death of Michael Brown. And so when Michael Brown was murdered, then you saw people coming in mass into Ferguson. And that rallying cry became louder and more insistent. So Black Lives Matter, then, if you remember, similar to today, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Philando Castile, I can't even remember the young man in Milwaukee. So we were having these space, Sandra Bland, of public deaths. And so Black Lives Matter was never designed to be an organization. It was designed to be a commitment that Black people would be pushing forward. And then what happened was that there were many organizational leadership and policy folks, legal folks that came together under the umbrella of the movement for Black lives. And that umbrella became a space where different policy pieces were put together in this larger agenda that was to secure the lives of Black people. And a part of that agenda was the agenda to move to, remember I said how the criminal justice has become the catch-all as a way of punishing poor people. We are seeing increased bloated criminal justice budgets from police to prisons, all of that, and a decrease in the actual things that serve communities, a decrease in public education, a decrease in after-school programming, a decrease in any kind of counseling. So the idea of defunding the police was about investing in communities and people and divesting yourself from this large, bloated, continuously growing carceral infrastructure. So defund the police actually means stop growing an infrastructure that is about punishment and grow an infrastructure that is designed to help Black thriving.
Okay. Imam Talib, weigh in. Because the Muslim community has a host of questions about the alliances we make. Where do we draw the line? How are we to understand we have a large immigrant community and a large African and Latinx Muslim community?
Yeah, and that's good. Charlene covered quite a bit there, and but the Muslim community obviously is as diverse as many other faiths in the society. But we got to understand this. And Charlene did a good job of explaining the organizational piece that worked on trying to move policy versus the aspiration in the human soul to get out and speak and be in the community. Because that goes way back. We're talking about 400 something years of slavery. And in fact, even when you turn the term black really came about during, we can say, Elijah Muhammad time. And this is one of the reasons why I'm saying that there's different perspectives on it, because if you weren't a part of that movement, then your affinity for being close to what's happening, and as we see a lot of the market communities, they were scrambling, trying to see how to address it, what to do, because they felt behind. But black was a term that you would fight over before Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And the color of the Negro were the main terms. And but he came out, he put that term black out there, and then James Brown made it popular with "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud."
Right.
And of course, Elijah Muhammad's son went to hear James Brown one time and asked him about that song. And his son, Wallace Muhammad, was surprised to know James Brown told him, "I got that from your father." And that's what made it popular in the society. And so, and that was the same movement. It was about our lives as human beings. And Muslims have an obligation to be concerned about human life. We have, so this is something that this is what the main concern is right now. And of course, Black Lives Matter is right now. We're not trying to push. Obviously, there was a need for that because we use color as a race, but we know we're not trying to be color conscious. We're trying to be human conscious and have an identity based on our consciousness as a human being. But right now, we're okay with using that term for now, because that's the catch term now. Because really, it's saying that if Black lives don't matter, how can all lives matter? If you pushing all lives don't matter, and you let things happen to Black lives, then really you have nullified that statement. Because it doesn't matter if the least don't matter, then the whole don't matter, because we're all a part of each other. We all go back to Adam, you know. And of course we begin to degrade our own humanity as a people. Anyone who they disparage or hate or try to kill anybody, you really begin to lose something. And that's what we saw happening over time in human history. People lost their humanity because they were able to kill another person just because they looked different, their color was different. And but so the Muslim community now, I think majority of them now have gotten real close to the movement. And Almighty God tells us in the Quran that we have to get with people who are doing right. We're supposed to partner with them to maximize our goodness. And we're seeing that in the history of the country. You look at the bridge in Selma, when they went across the bridge the first time, the things that happened, they didn't get a lot of attention. They went back the second time, they had more. They had whites with them, they had Jews with them, they had others with them, they had different priests and all of a sudden things begin to change because they help the. So we have to, we have to partner to maximize our voice and our resolve as human beings. We can't do it in a vacuum by ourselves. We're not created to do it in a vacuum by ourselves. And that's why we see really everybody's responding now, as you said, they're not Black, but they're out there because why? Because it's about humanity. They're all regardless of your color, your soul is human. They're different type. The soul don't have color. It's just a human soul. And we feel for each other. And that's what we see happen. That's why they went around the world. Went around the world because their very souls that God gave to every one of them begin to feel the pain, and they were touched, and they had to speak out and say, I am somebody. We have to stop this. Enough is enough. And that's been the cry. Enough is enough, and it is enough. And we're seeing that things have converged. This is 2020, and of course, everybody's saying it now. When you hear 2020, you think about vision. Some say perfect vision, but we do know it means clear vision. And so things are being made very clear now. In 20 times 20 is 400. So it comes right on the end of that 400 years, 2019, and then 2020 is 400. And so everything is being made very clear. The pandemic put things on hold, so now you got to think. Like we say, a lot of things compete for our time, compete for our mind, and people just haven't had given it an attention and let things pass them by. But everybody was slowed down now.
That's very true.
You see, and we had a chance now to look at what's actually happening.
And if it
hadn't happened, we would have seen the movement as powerful as it is right now. Had that not happened, where people are off jobs, off work, and other things in their home, and they got a chance to pay attention, look at the news, see what's happening, and get out. And the proof that is so strong drive, even in the midst of a pandemic, people were still driven because their own souls pushed them, propelled them to go out and do something, say something, stand up, as our beloved a congressman would say that passed. Get up, say something, do something.
John Lewis.
Yes, John Lewis. Yes.
There don't seem to be many more John Lewis is in our Black Caucus, which is unfortunate. But I can, if you've heard him once, you can hear his voice echoing.
Yes.
One other, there are a series of things that we must get into. What would be your potential solution for defunding the police? I've heard many different sides. One side says, well, you can't defund the police totally because you have to have policemen on the scenes because some perpetrators have weapons. On the other side, I've seen people say, well, take some of the money you give the police for doing everybody's function and give it to mental health care workers, domestic violence folks, social workers, so that they can do their job effectively. On the third hand, I've heard, well, put mental health care workers, domestic violence workers in police departments so that they go out as a team. What are your thoughts?
Well, everything that you said is a possibility. I wanna say it this way. We have the ability to take some of the money and put it towards mental health care. What we have been doing is actually putting police in schools. We have been putting police in places that would automatically criminalize our people, that will automatically, change their entire life and future. You can have a 5-year-old child become a felon because so when we talk about defunding the police, we are actually talking about, let's stop and rethink the way in which we have created an infrastructure of perpetual punishment, and that is hitting very hard poor people and Black people, people all across the country. It is because we are okay with this that we could put migrant children in cages, and because we have created a way in which this notion of policing has become the only way we think about being safe.
Mhm.
And when we talk to people about what does it mean to be safe, the first thing that comes to their mind is not to have a police officer next to them. It is, I feel secure and safe if I have a good job. I feel secure and safe if I have health care. I feel secure and safe if my children are secure and safe. There are all of these ways in which we need to have a different conversation, a conversation that, I loved how you talked about the human soul. We need to be building a world that responds to our human soul. Right now, the world that we live in, that is a world that is driven by that kind of violence and control and harm, is a world that is detrimental to our soul. And so if we think about defunding the police as a statement around our desire to create a different world that secures our soul, then we have a different response. And so that is what people are really crying for, is that. And the visceral response about defunding the police has also created an opportunity for a conversation that never would have been there. If people had gone in and said, well, let's try to, cut back on police stations, that's a different conversation than we
absolutely
say we will not allow for our communities to be harmed, criminalized, killed in this manner. And this is the vehicle that you're using to do it. And so therefore we want that vehicle dismantled, and collectively we can build something else. And that I believe is what folks are calling for.
We have a question, and I'm going to give this to Imam Talib. How does the Muslim find its voice in the Black Lives Matter movement when other agendas are being pushed, such as LGBTQ?
I personally don't know how to respond to that question, because the Black Lives Matter movement is pushing for Black lives to matter as a central step towards, as Iman said, all lives. Let's be clear that Black people have been the archetypical folk that all mechanisms of violence have been used against. We are the canary in the landmine. So if we are not mattering, we actually create a way for people to feel comfortable with the kind of violence that they have. And I'll give you an example in Charlottesville or in Portland, Oregon. If you really look at the people on the street, there were a lot of white people on the street, but the Black person is so in our psyche, as the problematic person, that when police came to wreak that kind of violence on people, the argument was still framed as though it was Black people and white people, and not white people and officers attacking young white children. So we have to the way in which we break this thing open is really to center on the humanity of Black people, because that's been the core, as the 400-year core of how we have actually as a country raised ourselves up to do inhumane things to people. And so until we can get to that place where we rectify that and create a different level of engagement with Black people, honoring our humanity, recognizing our leadership, making sure of our thriving, if we can't do that with Black people, then everyone is lost.
Imam Talib.
Yeah, and again, that it is sensitive with some, but it shouldn't be sensitive if we focus on the goal. We got to understand that we mentioned the goal, and Charlene just mentioned what it's really all about. And people, look, LGBT, their souls are not gay, lesbian, souls are not, again, souls are human. So they're being hit too, to speak as well. But if we focus on the label or the object, then we miss the goal. And then we deprive ourselves from being in the race to push forward what's really necessary, and that's the value of human lives. We have to maximize that value. Look, Charlene was talking about defuncting the police. Look, this whole thing is, I like the language that says re-envision, because we got to go look at the history of this term police and the history of it, and then coming out of slavery and what it was designed to do, and a lot of that has not changed. And especially when we look at now in terms of the 19th, maybe not 19th, but 13th Amendment, in terms of what that says about another way to continue slavery and get free labor, etc.
Right.
It has to be reinvented. Look, we know that communities don't have to have it. It's communities stay together, and the communities are healthy. Some of us on here now and that are listening know that they lived in communities that if you did something wrong, nobody called the police. The community checked you.
That's true.
Yeah, in fact, you may have been checked several times before you got back home. Because that tells us right.
Remind me. Don't remind me.
There we go. Yeah, so we have to re-envision, because Charlene mentioned some things that are very vital, because the more we see it the way it has been traditionally given to us, which we were always on the receiving end of injustice coming from that.
Yeah.
So if we don't re-envision it, then we're not going to be able to bring about the things that have been denied and been deprived, and the children's, the youth centers, all those things that they've been taking funds away. And they've been really our communities, and put in law enforcement to come back into our communities and oppress the community. We have to re-envision it.
Let us take a break right now. And I want to come back and see if and then how the rise in vigilantism and the kind of encoding of white supremacy affects all of this. We're going to take a short break and we'll come back to that question. Thank you.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an...
Our neighbors don't realize that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No peace! No justice! No peace!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world? You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward. That lesson learned brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
We've noticed, I looked at TV this morning, and one of the things I saw was something about the Department of Homeland Security saying that white supremacy is the greatest threat to America. I mean, I'm sure it changes by the day, because yesterday Black Lives Matter was, today is white supremacy, no telling what it'll be tomorrow. But clearly, in some states where there's open carry, especially, even in some states where there's concealed carry, white supremacists and other vigilante groups, I don't know, from what I'm hearing, there are thousands of them, are deciding, since the police can't protect buildings from these marauding protesters, that they must protect. For me, some of it is a ruse. I want to say, I'm not sure, but it sounds to me like, okay, now I have a stage. Sadi on our comments line says, don't forget that in many jurisdictions, the police do not have to have an education. All they need is no record, and they pass the psych test. I don't think some of them passed the darn psych test, or their relative was given it or something. So talk to me, Ma'am Talib. Let me start back with you again.
Okay. On that question that was just up.
Yeah, well, that, and what are we going to do about this vigilante stuff?
Oh, we have to stand against it. I mean, obviously, what's complicated is really the perception that we have, and is real, of the police right now, because really, with the community's help and the police, if they were on the same page, we could stop that. We could stop that.
Why are the black gangs standing against the vigilantes?
Because we know that if they step, we've been seeing it all on the news. You got whites come in, is quote unquote vigilantes. They can shoot, kill, have their weapon, they're gone. But if the gang members start doing that, we already know the dynamic is already stacked against if your color is black. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. That's one of the things that hinders. But they could do it. They could do it if they had the support of the local law enforcement. But right now, because most of the law enforcement, because of the perception, and again, a lot of it is real. Not all of them on that same page, but that perception is real, and that keeps people out from they hesitate to do anything, because they know that when they look, if their color is not the right color, then they can lose their life.
They would have been able to walk down the street with a AK-47, and everybody be giving you water, huh?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So it can be stopped. It can be stopped. And I think, and I'm saying it here, that I believe majority of it is out there because it has support. Because it wouldn't go out if they didn't have support, because it's too many protesters to their numbers.
Yeah.
It's too many. But because they know they have support. And we know this leadership, they know they expect the pardon and all kind of things coming from this leadership. They've already got the rhetoric that supports it. We've already seen the visits to the different areas, who they favor. So that's encouragement for those vigilantes. So it can be stopped. And of course, we're going back to the first question. The first thing is that we got to vote to change. We got to vote. Everybody got to vote. And the reality is that if we look at what happened in the last vote, they're saying 50% of the people that was eligible to vote did not vote. If that changes this time, then we're going to have change. We're going to have change, and we'll get changes, because this is the time now. We have to look. Everything has a season, and this is the time now for change. Everything has been, and we got help from Almighty God. Ma'am, so I have to bring in the faith element. We got help. Everything has converged now to put us in a situation to bring about change. 2019, we begin to change Congress. We've seen more diversity than we've ever seen in its history. More women in leadership positions. And so now we got another opportunity in 2020 to finish the congressional piece off, and the presidency now. And then we're positioned now, because people are being engaged more than ever before. We're learning about government more than ever before, how it works and how to make it work, and what your place is more than
that's very true
in human history. So we have to take advantage of the season to change, and things can change, just like seasons change.
Dr. Sinclair, what are we going to do if the vigilantes show up at the polling places? I mean, Black people can arm themselves.
Yes.
Like the imam said, they'll shoot us down first and let the vigilantes, he'll still be standing shooting us too.
Well, I think I'm going to continue to underscore what Imam Talib said, that everything has a season. And I'll also say there's nothing too new under the sun, right? This season that we're in is very much like the season we were in after enslavement, during Reconstruction. And what we're seeing right now is that there is a fear that white America is falling away. And it is. You know, there are more Black and brown people, and it is time for us to create a society where we are all human beings within it. And so what you're seeing is like the gasping, the dying death of a dying society. And they don't want it to go away. And so all this vigilantism was no different than the vigilantism that we saw coming out of Reconstruction, where they were trying to wipe out entire communities because people were moving forward. And what it takes is, back during Reconstruction, it took a Congress that said we would mobilize all of the government's resources to protect Black people. We don't have that today. That's why it is important for us to register, for us to actually get out and vote, for us to stand firm together, for us to show our collective power, because we need people we need people in city council, in the mayor's office. The mayor will determine many of the police chiefs. We need to be able to determine our budgets. We need to be able to have a Senate that will not have this rogue president. We need to be able to do all these things, because government is not the problem. The problem is who controls it, and is it controlled in the interest of the people themselves? So the only way we can actually do away with this vigilantism is to have collective power and to show it in multiple ways. And I will say that one of the things that Black PAC and Black PAC partners are doing will be training people to be poll watchers. They will be training people to do that. Now, let's be clear though. We also tell people, understand what this president may try to do, which is that if this president can rile people up to be afraid, to think that, that their lives are at stake, then we do have the potential of deep battles at polling places. But if we have people that are clear, mission focused, who are centered on the fact that they are doing this for the love of humanity, who will stand firm for justice, and will just do what needs to be done, that will be the key towards ensuring that not only will we be able to create a political environment that is centered on protecting us, but we will also be able to not allow for them to take our lives and to frame Black people as somehow dangerous and make us have to react to that notion of danger. I go back to, nonviolent direct action, standing firm in your humanity, standing firm collectively as a community, and doing what must be done. And I think that that's the way in which we can actually combat these vigilantes.
Imam Talib, I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, I want to just echo what Charlene was saying. This is a time for us now to really, and I'm seeing it. Unity is happening where it was seen not to have been possible. As a Muslim, even among, I would say, migrant Muslims, we have never been closer during these times than we ever been in the history of being in this country together. And that's just for the Muslims. But we've crossed that, and we're seeing our alliances, our partnerships are growing, and we are embracing really the best of our shared and common life and humanity. And we know that really we have to look at, as Muslims, that when Adam was created, Adam didn't have a racial identity, or ethnic identity, or a national identity. He was human. That was bigger. And the human identity is always going to be bigger and better to support us than the labels, the individual labels. They're not going to be big enough to support us. But coming together, we can support our shared and common life and we can begin to make change upon what? Our inherent goodness as human beings.
What can we, my program on Muslim Network TV is Critical Talk. What can I do to support, enhance, further the efforts of at least you two?
I would encourage everyone to go to blackpack.com. That's BLACKPAC.com, blackpack.com. Here we will register folks to do volunteer work. You had talked about, people being zoomed out, but every Saturday from 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern, we have people from all over the country get on Zoom. We play music, we do political education, and we do outreach. We text people, we phone folks, and we get folks excited about participating in this movement for a better world, because that's what we're doing. Imam said he can't leave this without bringing faith in. So I'm going to bring faith in, and I'm bringing in the book of Revelations, because at the end of that book,
That's a scary book. I looked at that book about 2 years ago. It was so funny because I fortunately or unfortunately, I've never been Christian. But one of my students said, something about Revelation. I said, okay, I'm going to read. I think I got past 2 pages.
No, you can't read it on your own.
Thank
I'll
you.
read it with you. You can't read it on your own. I'm going to call you up after.
Okay.
But the first chapters are a critique of the church. And throughout the book, it is a critique of materialism. And at the very end, it says God will come down on earth and be with the people. And God will be with the people because we have transformed society. And so what we're doing is God's work. We are transforming society so that we can be collective with each other and we can create that Eden on earth. This is the move that we are doing right now.
Okay, Imam, do you have a last word or two? We're a little over time, but I got to hear it.
Okay, as God says in the Quran, say, be a people standing for justice.
Yes.
And if we can just do that, then we're all going to meet in that right space. We're going to meet up together. And all the work that we're doing, we're going to meet. If you stand up, this is not the time to sit down. You got to get up, you got to take a stand, and we're going to meet. And that's how we're going to help each other get to the goal.
Okay, this is Professor Amin Dean with Critical Talk, and I've had too short a time with Dr. Charlene Sinclair and Imam Talib Sharif. It has been a bit of a journey to catch them and squirrel away some more of their time, but I hope in the future, in our 50 some odd days, that they see my name come across another email, please, that they respond. This has been wonderful, and I thank both of you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum and peace.
Alaikum assalam.